ielts speaking part 2 and part 3. In this video we take one real cue card, describe a famous city that is interesting, and build a band 9 answer from a blank page. Here is the plan. First, how part 2 actually works. Then the 1 minute of note-making, 4 brainstorms, and a full 2-minute long turn. After that, all 4 part 3 questions with model answers and a language bank you can steal. Part 2 in 3 lines. You get 1 minute with the card, paper and a pencil. Then you speak alone for 1 to 2 minutes. Then the examiner asks a short rounding off question. The bullets are a scaffold, not a checklist to tick. Aim to still be talking when the examiner stops you.
Describe a famous city that is interesting. You should say where it is, what the city is famous for, and why it is interesting. And explain how you feel about it.
So what do you do with a minute? Do not write sentences. You will read them aloud and sound flat. Write 3 or 4 keywords per bullet in the order you will say them. Add 1 number and 1 sensory detail, because those 2 things buy you specificity. And decide your last sentence now, so you never trail off. These are the notes I would actually write. About 3 dozen words. Notice there is no grammar here at all, just a running order and 4 anchors, a strait, a bazaar, a 1500-year-old wall, and 16 million people. Bullet 1, where it is. Istanbul, in northwestern Turkey, straddling the Bosphorus, with 1 foot in Europe and the other in Asia. Then anchor it to something personal, a study exchange 2 years ago, so it stops sounding like a guidebook. Bullet 2, what it is famous for. Signpost a list of 3, then actually deliver 3. Architecture, the Grand Bazaar, and the food. Vague candidates promise 3 things and give 1.5. Bullet 3, why it is interesting. Refuse the obvious answer. It is not one landmark. It is that the whole city is a living palimpsest, Byzantine, Ottoman and modern Turkish layers on the same street. Then make it concrete, and use sound as well as sight. And explain how you feel about it. Mixed feelings score higher than praise. Be exhilarated and be honest about the drawback, then land on the closing sentence you already planned. Put together, the long turn has 5 moves. Open with the city and a strong evaluation. Locate it with a personal hook. Expand with your 3. Deepen it, which is where band 9 is actually 1. Then close on feelings, including 1 drawback.
I'd like to talk about Istanbul, which is easily the most fascinating city I've ever set foot in. Geographically, it sits in northwestern Turkey, straddling the Bosphorus Strait, which makes it the only major city in the world with 1 foot in Europe and the other in Asia. I went there 2 years ago on a short study exchange and stayed on the Asian side, so my daily commute was a 20-minute ferry ride between 2 continents. As for what it's famous for, 3 things spring to mind. First, the architecture. The Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque are the postcard images, but the whole skyline is a jumble of domes and minarets. Second, the Grand Bazaar, a labyrinth of covered alleyways where you can haggle over carpets and hand-painted ceramics. And third, the food. The street food alone is worth the flight. Grilled fish sandwiches by the ferry terminals, and a coffee so strong it comes with a glass of water on the side. What makes it genuinely interesting, though, isn't any single landmark. It's that the city is a kind of living palimpsest. Byzantine, Ottoman, and modern Turkish layers stacked on top of one another, often on the same street. You can be sitting in a hipster coffee shop, glance up, and realize the wall beside you is 1500 years old. The soundscape does something similar. The call to prayer drifting across the water while the ferries blast their horns underneath it. As for how I feel about it, I'm a bit torn, if I'm honest. It's exhilarating, but it's also relentless. 16 million people and traffic that has to be seen to be believed. Even so, I came away completely captivated, and I'd go back tomorrow if somebody handed me a ticket.
Here is the whole long turn on one screen, so you can see the shape rather than hear it. Pause the video and read it once for structure and a second time for the phrases in bold. The Part 2 Language Bank. 8 items. Learn them as whole phrases because examiners hear collocation, not vocabulary lists. Now Part 3, which is a different game. Part 2 was about you. Part 3 is about people in general, so shift to society. Aim for 4 to 6 sentences, a claim, a because, an example, and a qualifier. Hedge honestly, then still commit.
What advantages can tourism bring to a city?
Quite a few, I think. The most obvious one is economic. Tourism creates jobs across a whole range of skill levels, from hotel work to tour guiding, and a lot of that money circulates locally. Beyond the economics, though, it often gives a city a reason to look after its heritage. Buildings that might otherwise have been left to crumble get restored because visitors want to see them. And there's a softer benefit too. When a city is used to outsiders, people tend to become more open-minded and more willing to learn languages. So it's cultural as much as financial.
Why do some young people like to live in cities?
I'd say it mainly comes down to opportunity. Cities are where the graduate jobs are concentrated, so if you're ambitious, moving is almost a default rather than a decision. On top of that, there's the lifestyle. Everything from live music to late night food is on your doorstep, and you can get around without owning a car. And I think anonymity plays a part as well. In a small town, everybody knows your business, whereas in a city, you can reinvent yourself, which is rather appealing in your 20s.
Do most elderly people live in the city or in the countryside?
It varies enormously from country to country, so I can only really generalize. The traditional pattern is that older people stay in rural areas, often in the family home, partly because the younger generation has migrated to the cities for work. But that seems to be shifting. A lot of retired people are now moving back into urban areas, precisely because that's where the hospitals, the public transport, and their grandchildren are. So if I had to commit, I'd say the countryside still has an older population on average, though the gap is narrowing.
Do you think well-developed tourism will have negative effects on local people?
It certainly can, yes, though I don't think it's inevitable. It depends on how it's managed. The most damaging effect is probably on housing. Once landlords realize they can earn more from short-term holiday lets, rents rise and long-term residents get priced out of their own neighborhoods. There's also a subtler cost, which is that local culture can end up being packaged as a performance for visitors rather than something people actually live. That said, cities that cap visitor numbers or tax short stays seem to manage the trade-off reasonably well, so I'd frame it as a challenge rather than a curse.
The Part 3 language bank. These are the joints of a discussion answer, the hedges, the concessions, and the phrase that tells the examiner you are about to commit to a position. Why this reads as Band 9, criterion by criterion, and the honest caveat, Band 9 here is our own quality assessment against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Your turn. 1 minute, keyword notes only, about a city you actually know. Then record 2 minutes without stopping. Steal the structure, not the content, because Istanbul is not your answer. The Master 79.